Kris Krinkle Chapter 1. After the king's death, the heirs to the throne were the twin-born prince and princess. They were known to be a handsome young man and a beautiful maiden, but because strongly guarded in the castle, they had only been glimpsed on rare occasion. Neither their faces nor their thoughts were widely known. Throughout the land that had once been ruled by a princess symbolizing a woman's love, and later by a warrior prince, all wondered what sort of rule their new heirs would make known by proclamation. Some thought the princess would surely rule. Some said, surely the prince. Some said that both would rule together and jointly. Many said a joint rule would be good and well balanced. All rumors coming from the castle were agreed that the twins' affection for each other was great and they would certainly act in harmony, but no rumors could give any weight to what might be their plans, nor the manner of the thoughts from which such plans might come. It was a field for wide speculation. However, speculation was leisurely. Urgency for rule was not great. Indeed, a ruler was hardly needed. In the last years of the hardened king's rule, the power of the royal word became absolute, and the discipline with which it was executed so great that it became fable. It was said that the world's most beautiful virgin could travel alone from border to border of the kingdom, with all the horns of the reindeer that pulled her sleigh decked with jewels, jewels for which any king would sacrifice half his kingdom, and she would need have no fear for her person, nor fear that the smallest jewel from the horn of any reindeer would ever be stolen. Such was the formal rigor of the rule instituted by the King of the Sun as he tried, in the only way that seemed to him possible, to spread the good graces found by him in the Valley of the Moon. Conformity to this discipline had become a strong habit. No one doubted that any decree which his heirs might make would be obeyed, instantly and without question. The young prince and princess knew this also. They were awed by the responsibility such conditions imposed upon them. Their queen mother had died before they were old enough to be taught much, and the king had been much too busy with far-reaching affairs to instruct mere children in the ways of rulers. Fearing the displeasure of the king, most of the palace attendants had been afraid to go beyond their assigned duties in approaching the children. It was therefore a childhood of great loneliness that the prince and princess had become a young man and a young woman. The palace attendants had always obeyed their wishes, obeyed with alacrity, obeyed with eagerness, often with kindness, but they truly loved and were loved only by the old palace carpenter. The carpenter was a big man, robust of health and of great vigor, a man with a round face and merry laughing eyes, accented by crinkles at the corners. Such a big man would have made a mighty warrior, but his great size made him shy in expressing his love for the children. The needed tenderness seemed to him appropriate only to a woman, yet his heart was full of overflowing for the orphaned children of his moon princess. Also, he knew that if the kingdom was ever again to have happy adults, it must grow them up from happy children. New doors of joy had to be found and opened. The hearts of children had to be explored. So he made them little boxes with drawers and doors that were great puzzles to open. He carved them whistles and dolls and soldiers and animals with jointed legs that could move so that they seemed to be walking. Because, thanks embarrassing him, he always let them find things he made for them and pretended he knew nothing of the source from which came all the toys. Out of love for him, they played the game his way, but they spent much time with him in his carpenter shop. There he could talk without feeling of shyness. When he had some complicated-looking carpentry work to cover the embarrassment of his playing with children, he would sometimes tell them stories and give them full, careful answers to their questions, questions about their great kingdom and the big world surrounding it. To make such talk possible, it was necessary only to act as if making a joint fit exactly was the important business of life, and the rule of kingdoms was something to be sandwiched in when important work had time gaps that could be stuffed with such trivial matters. They came to understand this game too and play it. After the king died, the prince and princess talked together about how they should rule. The prospect did not appeal to them. Everywhere, men seemed only to wait for orders from monarch. Even women, who had once given their love when and where their hearts told them, now held it back as a coin to be used in bargaining for prestige and position. The prince and princess listened to their advice of prime ministers and prelates and saw their cruel calculations as essential part of the game of government. They also saw the greedy graspings of those who had blindly tasted the power porridge and cried for more without knowing its substance. The game of piling up power is ugly and should be ended, they agreed. Rule of a people should be a thing of spirit only, as in the days of our mother. It may be you should take the throne, suggested the prince to the princess tentatively. After the harsh discipline, the people need to feel again the touch of a woman's love and tenderness. Things are no longer as they were when there was symbolic rule by our mother, said the princess. Since new ways have come into our kingdom, women try to use their beauty as a weapon. A woman on the throne would no longer be seen as a symbol of a woman's love. Before a woman can again be seen as a woman, a man standing by her must be seen in a man's full stature. You must provide such a symbol. That too is no longer possible, the prince told her. A prince can no longer be seen as tall because of his own measure, only by measuring the size of his armies. The symbol of a prince is no longer that of an admirable man, but of a clever general. New symbols are needed in place of the old ones that have lost their meanings. With this, the princess agreed. Then she mused with great seriousness. Man is a builder. Shall we put Kris, the carpenter, on the throne and make a hammer and axe the symbols of our kingdom? No, said the prince. He answered quickly because he had already considered the possibility and rejected it. Kris, he said, turned himself into a carpenter with great reluctance, only when other sovereigns turned themselves into soldiers. Our people are much too fine to be represented only by a hammer and axe, just as Kris is too big a man to be called only a carpenter. His hand aches for a sword, but he is much too big a man to wear a sword for aimless swagger. He himself has said that the sword has lost its old meaning. The sword that was once ready to destroy men with an ambition for power over others now symbolizes the very ambition it once sought to destroy. But the tools of labor cannot be lifted up in place of the old symbol that has been desecrated. Man is not man because of his buildings, but because of his own dreams. Set a boundary to the unrestrained buildings of others. Not man's buildings and not even his blood are fit things to be honored as inviolable. The only thing worthy of such honor, other than woman's love, is something unseen and intangible. It is real, but it can be expressed only by symbol. So the symbol must be chosen very carefully. A sword by his side could once give meaning to a man's clear eyes and broad shoulders, as a baby in her arms gives meaning to the being of woman. But a sword has ceased to mean a man of integrity and come to signify the might of a massed army. The sword pledged to strike upon orders is no longer sacred. Dreams, not orders, each man must have, and he himself only, can judge their value and the extent to which he will defend them. Dreams shared are what make sovereign individuals into a people. A people who have lost their dreams are a people who have lost their direction and unity. Simple people need something intangible to stand for abstract so they can see that their dreams have substance. But the hammer and axe can never stand for the finest in man's being, as the finest was once symbolized by the sword. The princess had also heard the old carpenter's mutterings at his work and thought about them. She understood the prince's meaning and agreed. Then she brought out an idea she had long considered and held back until all else was rejected. Not you and not I should take the throne, said the princess. Neither one of us alone, nor we two together as brothers and sister. Great changes need to be made in the world we haven't inherited. It seems the game of prestige and power makes men and women lower than any animals living. This condition was created by men, and it can therefore be changed by men. But great wisdom is needed for great changes. The needed wisdom may come to us when we are older. We are young now, but at least we are wise enough to be true to what is in us. Let us act upon what our young hearts tell us. We can lay the beginnings of a new foundation for people by becoming at least as good as other animals. At least a woman can hold in her arms a child who bears the image of her protector, a protector who is not a far-off king nor faceless army, but one real man. Separately, let us go away and find mates among those who know and care nothing for position. From time to time, we can meet and discuss our obligation to use the power we have inherited. Then, if either has found a dream that we deemed worthy, we will lift that dream up where all can see it, by one making a formal return to the palace. It was a new idea, and the prince pondered it long and thoughtfully. At last, he stated his only objection. If we are disguised and unknown, he said, rumor that we are dead will be circulated, and the throne will be taken by some clever schemer. Together, they thought of this in silence. Then they looked at each other, and, reading each other's eyes, both burst out with joyous laughter. Kris would not want to rule, they said, but no one could push him away while he sat on the throne. The picture of the frail, scheming priest or the prissy little prime minister trying to push big Kris from the throne furnished them with wondrous amusement. It was a deeply joyous thing, not merely comical, because they knew the immovable outward bulk also represented the kind old Kris's quiet determination. Kris listened to their plan and had no heart to refuse them. They told him they would announce him as temporary monarch, proclaim their plans for disguising themselves, and become better acquainted with their kingdom, and then decree that, until their return, all men would be individually sovereign, as in the day Selene was princess. Thoughtfully, he agreed to cooperate in their wishes. Then they turned to the adventure of putting their plan into action. So that's the end of today's reading from Kris Krinkle Chapter 1, honey. I'll start on the rest of that chapter tomorrow, and maybe we'll go into Chapter 2 some as well.